Incoming President Donald Trump has said that he plans to end the Ukraine war before he ever takes office. But with the inauguration just a day away, that promise seems to have been worthless. But don't worry, he said, within 24 hours of him taking office, he will have the conflict solved. But it seems like even that is not going to happen. But what has the president-elect been up to in the meantime, while that could possibly be drawing his attention other than a major national security crisis? And more importantly, what is the outgoing president's chief warning for Americans? Plus, why can we not even trust the absolute buffoons that the president-elect has surrounded himself with? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Do me a favor, guys. Hit that subscribe button. You know I'm going to trigger a bunch of people by criticizing both parts of the administration. So those of you that appreciate an actual take with nuance, please subscribe. Let the algorithm know that you're one of the people that can actually comprehend more than one idea at a time. So, President-elect Trump has promised he would end the Ukraine war in a single day, right? But as he's floated more and more of his plan, it sounds more and more like that's not going to happen, right? He sort of, on the campaign trail, he moved the target. He said he'd solve the Ukraine war before he ever took office. Well, that's officially failed, but he's totally going to do it within 24 hours of taking oath. It's totally going to be planned, guys. Unfortunately, the problem with a war between Ukraine and Russia is that Donald Trump doesn't actually have final say in what happens. Now, since his election victory, of course, his team does not have a peace plan outlined. It doesn't even have a proposal they've submitted to Ukraine's leadership. And there's been no diplomacy between Kiev, Moscow, and Mar-a-Lago. In fact, the architect of Trump's plan, Keith Kellogg, was supposed to visit Kiev and canceled that trip, which seems kind of unusual for someone who's going to need Ukraine to sign off on his peace plan that's totally just a few hours away from being implemented. But the deeper problem is that Vladimir Putin himself is actually one of the biggest obstacles. Well, I could have told you that 2 years ago. Why don't you put me in charge of the Department of State? Where, of course, Putin, as we've talked about, is that while this war is costing Russia a lot, for the time being, Russia is not facing existential problems, right? Their economy has a high rate of inflation, but it is not yet an inflationary crisis. Their economy is facing a massive casualties, but those who haven't died are getting higher wages. And so sort of by definition, there seems to be a sort of placid acceptance of this within Russian society, right? As long as the average Russian, or particularly those Russians that are well connected, those that live in, say, St. Petersburg or Moscow, they're very insulated from the war, right? The casualties that Russia has taken in this conflict disproportionately are prisoners, are the extreme poor, and foreign volunteers, all of which are not really factors in the thinking of urban, wealthy Russians. And so as a result, Putin does not feel he's in any hurry. In fact, he actually may be interpreting the Trump administration's overtures to end the war soon as a sign that the West is exhausted and unable to continue, that Russia has actually outlasted the West. While in fact, the United States has actually, believe it or not, barely even tapped into its ability to mobilize for a conflict, right? Let's see if I can find it here. And when you look at the numbers for defense spending as a percentage of GDP over time, here it is from the Department of Defense. This is the gross domestic product of the United States. What percentage of that is spent on war? During the Korean War, for example, about 11% of the U.S.'s GDP was spent on war. In 65, that was down to 6.5%, but rised to 8.5% during Vietnam, then fell to a mere 4.5% during 1979, right? Interestingly, they say 1985 they tag as the Cold War. This is the Reagan Cold War ramp up. And then finally, as the Cold War ended, the U.S. got what it called a peace dividend, the extra cash in its budget for living in a world without the Soviet Union, where we spent a mere 2.7% on GDP. Now, of course, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan nearly doubled that, but now we actually spend 2.7% of our GDP on defense spending. And this is pretty fascinating to me because Well, the United States is, there's a lot of people who are click-clacking on Twitter saying that the U.S. spends too much money on Ukraine. How could we be spending all this money on the Ukrainians? And the answer is this is a rounding error, right? U.S. defense spending as a percent of GDP currently sits, again, at around 3.25% in 2022, and it's now even lower still. So this, I think, is the takeaway here, where, again, U.S., they say, oh, U.S., you spent 3.5%. We're spending even less now. And bear in mind, guys, you have countries like China. Russia is actually dropping 6% of its GDP on defense spending. And this is, again, about from 2023, 2022. And so I think the thing to remember is that for the U.S., this is like a rounding error, whereas for Putin, it's existential, right? His expenditures on this are comparable to U.S. expenditures at the height of the Cold War. And for Putin, though, he still feels that he has politically the West on the ropes, that they don't want to spend more on Ukraine, that he is going to push and push and push until he gets everything he wants and then some, including the total defeat of the Ukrainian army and the surrender of Ukraine entirely. Therefore, when asked, Putin is like, I will not be sitting down for peace talks. It's not going to happen. Russia officially rejected all of the proposals from the U.S., even though they've yet to see an official proposal even floated. Putin prefers, simply put, Putin prefers this wartime country. He gets to enact many of the repressive measures that he's wanted to for a long time. And so again, the Trump administration, they're going to come to the conclusion that the cooler heads have known for at least 2 years now, which is that Putin is only going to negotiate when he feels his position is going to get worse over time. It's going to be degraded over time. And that, I think, is a core problem here, is that ultimately Putin right now feels his position is getting better and better. So why should he slow down? Particularly because he feels that the Ukrainian military is on its last legs. But of course, we know that's not been the case for a long time, right? The Ukrainian military was inevitably facing defeat, again, like every month for the last 2 years. Now, before we talk about what Trump has been up to since then, instead of negotiating peace in this global conflict, I want to mention, of course, that if you feel like you are tired of spending $5 a pop on energy drinks and you want to get the combat-tested energy solution, you want Strike Gum. With 90 milligrams of caffeine in every piece, it's got all the caffeine of a Red Bull or an Amp Energy, but none of the sugar. There's 5 energy drinks worth of caffeine in just this little pack here. Plus, it's a refreshing mint flavor, so your breath isn't going to smell like coffee or like cough medicine, which is what I think all energy drinks taste like. So check us out at StrikeGum.com or go to Amazon and search for Strike Gum. All right. Now, President Trump, right, busy guy. He's coming into office with a lot on his plate, from immigration to the Ukraine war, not Israel-Gaza. Apparently, there's a ceasefire in place already, but he's focused on the things that truly matter to the average American. Shitcoins. That's right. Trump, of course, in preparation for his taking office, the president of the United States has released an absolute crypto scam, right? And this is troubling for a lot of reasons. Again, Trump is ahead of, among other things, the SEC, right? He's the president. The SEC is an executive agency. So he gets to both regulate cryptocurrency and also launch his own cryptocurrency. Currently, that is trading at around $70 a coin, meaning that President Trump's technical wealth is approximately $60 billion richer as a result of this coin. Now, everyone can see this as a shit coin. Why? Because if it looks like a shit and it smells like shit, it probably is shit. So this coin, God, I can't even believe I'm saying this. This coin has about 80% of the tokens of this coin locked up in one wallet, almost certainly controlled by Trump or his team. This is, again, the exact same playbook of the Hawk Tour girl. So let that sink in, that the Hawk Tour girl and the president of the United States are operating the same financial scam. And it is a scam because can anyone put it in the comments if there is any true value to a Trump coin, right? Does it do anything anything unique, anything specific, anything at all that makes this a better product than other competing cryptocurrencies? Explain to me any kind of utility, right? Again, when you buy a share of Apple, you know that the iPhone does some shit that Samsung doesn't. Does this coin do anything that anything doesn't do? That any other coin doesn't do? No. It's a scam coin. It's Hawk to a coin 2.0. But it's being run by the president of the United States. This is absolutely preposterous. Not necessarily because Donald Trump is running a scam, right? This is the same man who ran Trump Steaks. What makes me mad is that, listen, I have said this. I want the Trump administration to do great things for the country. Like, who doesn't want the president to govern well? And that Trump has an opportunity, as someone with a reputation of being a wild man, to negotiate and put the fear into America's enemies, because he will do things that, say, President Biden was simply demonstrated he was never willing to do. But to do those things, you have to give a shit about the country. And running a crypto scam isn't that. Right? This is why, in his last remarks, and likely one of probably his last public appearances, full stop, given his frailty, President Biden made a dire warning to Americans, right? He said, literally, that the 90% of the speech is how great the things he's done are, which always I always roll my eyes because it's like, dude, you're leaving office. You're the president. You don't need to like jerk yourself off on all the stuff you've done. But here he says, I want to warn the country of some things that give me grave concern, right? And that's the dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra wealthy people. He calls it an oligarchy taking shape in America. Extreme wealth, power, and influence threatening our democracy, basic rights and freedom, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead, right? And he says all the wealthy want to do is play by the same rules that everybody else does. Again, do you get to use your job to launch a shit coin to the tune of a couple $2 billion? No, of course not, right? And here's the thing. If you were Putin, what would I do if I was Putin? If I was Putin, I would buy every one of those fucking shit coins off the market. And then I would go to Trump and I would say, listen, I've run up the price of your dirtbag coin and I will dump that coin and tank your net worth if you don't give me Ukraine. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? In fact, that's probably why it's $70 a coin. Do you see how this scam is already, do you see why it makes me mad? Right? It's one thing to be a shitty politician using your office for personal gain. It's another thing to literally hand your enemies the ability to gain tremendous leverage over you, right? Normally, right, selfish politicians, greedy politicians, come up with ways to do it that insulate themselves from being blackmailed. But somehow, he literally creates the blackmail machine. Buy the coin, drive up the price, and then get negotiated. It's absurd. It is completely fucking absurd. I guarantee it that some country hostile to the United States owns a lot of these shitty coins and will dump them, is going to threaten to dump them if the president doesn't do what they say. Right? And remember, the market cap of this is like $50 billion. That's a lot of money. Okay? But don't worry, guys. Don't worry. Trump's surrounded by the best. By men of tremendous integrity, commitment to the country. That's not true either. He's surrounded by fucking man-children, right? And this is why I wanted to talk about Trump's best buddy, the first bro, Elon Musk. Now, you may know Elon Musk has a serious task ahead of him, one that I think is actually pretty noble, which is getting a government that is leaner, takes the best principles of lean, effective governance of corporations and brings those practices into the government, where a streamlined, more effective government can deliver services as good or better at a tremendously lower cost. That is what Elon Musk has done his whole life. And so it would make sense then that as he ramps up for this epic project, in addition to the several other companies he runs, again, it's hard to run these companies when you're doing all this stuff. Elon Musk, instead of launching a shitcoin, right? Instead, he is beefing with gaming streamers and committing what appears to be an absolutely childlike amount of fraud in the game Path of Exile too. Why am I talking about this? Because I want you guys to understand why this, when you're a person with no integrity, everything you do is devoid of integrity, right? So, like, I just, this is who Elon Musk is, right? And the nice thing about this is that I don't know how to build rockets, and I don't know how to build cars. But I go, well, you look at the guy, his cars are good, his rockets are good. And if he says, hey, I'm actually also an elite level gamer, and here's my elite level gamer accounts, I go, huh, all right, well, I actually know a thing or two about Path of Exile. And I used to really play a lot of Diablo 2 back in the day. And if you don't know, Diablo 2, Path of Exile, Diablo 3 and 4, those are all sort of games that are in the same genre. They all actually play the same way. In fact, if you're a high-level Diablo 2 player, you can pretty much drop into Path of Exile, and you at least have the mechanics down. And so Elon Musk claimed on a podcast multiple times that he was one of the greatest players in the entire server of Diablo and Path of Exile. And he had characters that, in fact, were indeed attributed to Elon Musk that, for example, had done some pretty insane things. He had a softcore character. Softcore is a term for a character when the character dies, they just respawn back in town with their gear. They respawn back in town without their gear, excuse me. He claimed he had a softcore character who farmed 9 citadels from the first 11 days of launch, which again would mean that he basically played around the clock in those first 11 days. The launch, of course, taking place in December of the first week of December, which is absolutely insane. And would mean basically that he played, again, nonstop for several days. He also claimed to have had the 59th ranked hardcore character, which means, of course, the character dies anytime at any point. It's gone forever. The character's name, Kekis Maximus, which is very Elon Musk. And he claimed to have had another Perseverance, the 21st ranked hardcore character. These are unbelievably high achievements in gaming, right? And he claims, of course, he had several other hardcore characters who have since died, and deleting the character. So, what people said is, damn, Elon is truly a genius, building rocket ships, building electric cars, and he has time to become an elite of the elite gamer. And so they said, when he said he was going to stream Path of Exile, everyone said, we have to see what this is like, because this is someone who has discovered efficiencies in the game in which only a few dozen hours, he is able to level up multiple hardcore characters. This is something that truly, he must have a level of optimization within the game that is beyond anything that anyone else has ever seen. So tons of people tuned into this to watch it. And what they saw was not a super optimized, high efficiency, unbeatable character. Instead, it was someone who not only did not appear to understand how Path of Exile worked, right? With, again, they point out that Path of Exile's endgame is a series of connected nodes that you navigate using an atlas. He appeared to not understand this, but his characters, based on their gear and level, certainly had to run hundreds and likely thousands of these atlas maps. He also did actions that are fundamental to not just this game, but that style of game. It'd be the equivalent of playing Pokemon and not having your Pokemon know any moves. That's what this is like. And so he would pick up items and drag them into his inventory manually. He could not understand why he could not pick an item up when his inventory is full. he would see things on the maps indicating different difficulty modifiers, and he described them as things on the map, right? Essential information to know when going into a level. He also did not appear to understand his gear. He did not understand, and his account notably had a tab that was referred to it. It said Elon's Maps, which again, might just be Elon being a fucking weirdo, but in all likelihood, it's probably because someone else played his account, got it up to that level, and turned it over to him, right? And there are just an absurd number of stories like this. And the thing that's worrisome is that this appears to be sort of closer to his MO than anyone wants to admit. In fact, in April, 3 major executives quit Tesla in the span of 2 weeks, right? And these were really troubling things. One was the vice president of investor relations. This is someone who communicates with investors. And so remember, guys, if you're going to defraud investors, this is someone who would be criminally liable for doing so, right? This is the position anyway. One of these senior vice presidents, and a public policy and business development executive. There's also been, of course, a lot of these reports, a lot of these executives who have bailed on Tesla. And it's pretty troubling to see this sort of stuff, right? And it's an indicator, a hint that this path of exile thing might be part of the way Elon Musk does business. And again, when you see a lot of smoke in different places, you start to think there's a fire. When I watch, for example, the president run a cryptocurrency scam, I watch his chief advisor run a scam, a gaming scam, and then you see more and more of the companies he's associated with bleed out people, particularly in an investor relations and regulatory space. It indicates that this is not an administration that's going to be serious about fixing anything, particularly with regards to the Ukraine war. This is an administration that appears to be on the path to be easily blackmailed, easily taken advantage of, and easily bribed, right? Again, the number one way to not get blackmailed is, in fact, to not have anything that people can blackmail you on. This is like a core principle of like every security clearance. That's why they're like, well, don't have debt. Don't have a ton of debt in your security clearance, because if you do, we're going to revoke it. Because again, people in debt can easily get blackmailed. So again, this is not like, I'm not someone who's like, oh, I want Trump to fail, bro. I want him to fail. No, dude, I want him to succeed. I want him to kick ass and take names, right? Just like I wanted Biden. I wanted Biden to defy expectations. I wanted him to be dynamic and capable, a skilled negotiator. He wasn't those things, obviously. The Ukrainians, again, can't end. He doesn't have the spine to end a war, but doesn't have the stomach, right, to actually stand up to Putin. And I want Trump to do well. But when I see shit like this, it just tells me that the odds of this being anything other than the scam, 4 years of just blatant, brazen looting of the government, like everything short of opening up the treasury and hauling out barrelfuls of dollars, is what's going to be happening first, foremost, and probably only, if we're honest with ourselves. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thanks to Bill Collier, Robert Colburn, Gars Martin, Gina Cresta, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Karis, L90, and Petra Taruru. And all, of course, of our Lieutenant tier members. I could not do this without you guys. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.